So Inner Climate Academy, it's a project in Oroville that started officially 2 years ago, although I guess for a year before that, during lockdown, I was sort of ideating and applying for funds, and the name came first and collaborations came after. And, so for me, it's been 3 years, but in its functioning, it's been 2 years. And the idea is that focus on the inner dimensions of the climate crisis. We're going through a climate and ecological emergency. There are all kinds of systems collapse that's happening in the world. And yet, how do we envision an earth-honoring, life-affirming human presence on this planet? And we believe that no matter how this journey unfolds, and it's going to be a difficult journey, that maybe humans are, we are capable of creating a better experience for ourselves and for all of life on this planet. And it starts with us turning inwards and looking at our own relationship with ourselves, with the rest of the world, rest of human life, rest of more than human life on this planet. So we facilitate collaborative research, dialogue. We lead explorations into the personal and interpersonal relationships that we might have with the more than human world and the earth itself, and how that might transform our relationship with this world and how we live on it. So some of our strategies are, global cross-cultural exchanges, dialogues, and inner inquiry on ecocentric perspectives and indigenous worldviews. So ecocentric perspectives, I'll go into it a bit in depth later, but basically the way that we live on this planet right now is from a very human-centric approach. We believe that we are the center of this experience that we're having of the world that we live in, and everything comes from there. What if we are not? What if we remove ourselves from the center and place all of life in an interconnected perspective? And then how would we live on this planet? We don't know. And yet there are humans on this planet who know how to live like that. Indigenous communities have always lived like that. So it's holding the modern human life and the possibility of moving towards something that is more than just the human centeredness, and also supporting a way of life that still exists on this planet that is ecocentric. Perhaps ecocentric is a very limited way of looking at indigenous worldviews, but I guess for our modern human perspective, that's a good way to understand it. We also, engage in cultural bridge building. So we invite indigenous elders into our program, indigenous leaders, women leaders into our programs, as teachers who sort of share their stories and their lived experience of what it means to live in harmony or live in a reciprocal, relational way with nature. We also try to bring that into local place-based climate action. This is a new avenue for us. So we're starting with the Oroville bioregion, looking at the villages around Oroville, villages, peri-urban centers, rural communities around Oroville, and asking the question of, what is collective emotional resilience? And how does it interact with climate adaptation? And how can traditional ecological knowledge help with that? Especially in communities where that knowledge is being lost in a very rapid pace. We also run facilitated engagements with community, which is the global community in an online space on collective emotional resilience, through facilitated, online workshops, talks with artists, with activists who have found their own ways of engaging with that, the emotional dimensions of living in a world and knowing that things are collapsing around us and acting towards that. It's very easy to move into a burnout, especially what we see with young activists these days is because they are born into and live this reality all their lives. And so it's a very different way of relating to the world. So creating spaces where people can come and engage with that and share their experiences, hold vulnerability within the space, create safe spaces. We do that once a year in maybe a month-long program. And through all of this, we hope to develop a knowledge repository, of how we're doing this and what the impact was, so that other people can take that, and it'll all be open access, to take that knowledge and create spaces and programs and engagements that they can then bring to their own communities and work with. So this is what I mentioned with ecocentric worldview. So here you can see very clearly that in an egocentric or anthropocentric worldview, the human is on the top, and you have animals who are of use to the humans, domestic animals, the next tier, and then wild animals and animals that are far away from the human experience down below. Whereas in an ecocentric perspective, it is a circular model where everything is interconnected with everything else, and the human is part of it, not apart from it. And we are also connected to the life around us, but in that circular, reciprocal, relational manner. Another thread that we weave through most of our activities is women's earth stewardship. So it's looking at gender and looking at what does it mean, when you talk about women's leadership in ecological restoration. And a lot of international programs and organizations will attest this, that in terms of climate adaptation, there is a revolution going on this planet in a very grassroots level, led by women. Because in most cases, in a place-based, rural, grassroots community, women are usually in charge of nutrition, of food. And so they probably are the ones who first notice change when they're not able to grow a certain herb or a certain nutritional plant that they feed their children with. And so they're the first sort of front runners of adaptation. And women are innovating and adapting to the changes that are happening across the globe, especially in the global south. And so with Women's Earth Stewardship, we are hoping to amplify these stories and support this sort of adaptation that's happening at the grassroots level. So emotional resilience in climate crisis. So as I mentioned, we run programs to support and nurture emotional resilience. And what do we mean by emotional resilience? It's not the fact that, we have to be okay with what's happening, but it's more like, how do we pick ourselves up? Because this is hard and we are going to fall down with this, but how do we pick ourselves up? And how do we pick each other up? Because I think there is a part of us that heal only in the collective. There are parts of us that we can heal only together. And as more and more systems collapse and as more and more emergencies come our way, we need to be able to hold each other and help each other move forward. So creating these spaces also become very important for future readiness. And so how do we include that in local place-based climate adaptation? Because the communities that are dealing with climate adaptation at the moment in the world are mostly grassroots communities. And often we think that, we need to think of physical resources because they are lacking that. Yes, but as humans, we also need emotional resourcing. So how do we create spaces in those communities where, or even it may not be that we have to bring in anything new. They may have their own base of emotional resourcing. It's more to create spaces where they can get into that while dealing with change on a daily basis. Here's, if you know Kate Raworth's donut model, this is inspired from that. And what we've tried to do here is to place the donut in a multi-species world with a biocultural foundation rather than just an ecological ceiling. the Earth stewardship model that ICA has four main components, and with most of our programs, what we try to do is to create leadership that is Earth stewardship, and what we mean by Earth stewardship is that it arises from these core principles. One is interconnection. Interconnection as in an experienced understanding of our profound interconnection with all of life. It's very easy to kind of get the concept that we are interconnected, but how do we experience it in our lives? How do we? So we create processes around that where people who participate in our programs get that real feel of what that interconnection means, so that our multiple intelligences in our body can engage with this process. The second one is empowerment for justice and harmony. So once we experience the interconnection with all of life, we hope that there comes an empowerment that in ourselves that wants to work towards justice and harmony on this planet. Because a lot of the times when people talk about interconnection and being one with the world, there is a lack of this real sense of injustice that's also happening in the world, right? A lot of the effects of the climate crisis are met by people who are marginalized already because of class, caste, race, skin color, economic disparities. So while we experience the interconnection with all of life, then that empowerment has to come where we also feeling the injustice of what's going on. And from that compassion, act towards creating justice and harmony on this planet. And come to it from a duty of care as a species. So we talk about duty of care as a species, meaning as a species on this planet that is aware of what's going on, there is a duty that comes of caring for other species and caring for the ecosystems. And we also then say that all of this can only happen if there's a living, thriving state of being within oneself. So we try to create spaces where the participants can experience that thriving state of being while working towards justice and harmony in an interconnected world. So that's the ICA Earth Stewardship model. So one of our programs is the Emerging Leaders Forum. We had the first cohort last year, started in December 2021 and went on till July 2022. We had 6 people from Oroville, 12 from across India and 6 from Australia. So this was part of an India-Australia collaboration. We had facilitated session, we had academics come and speak about ecocentric perspectives from different academic research. We had Indigenous elders come and speak about their lived experience, but also about resistance movements that they are part of. And so this journey was very rich. It has resulted in several collaborations, and we have a book coming out now where everyone's sharing their experiences as part of the program. And one of the questions, or some of the questions that we had while we were running the program was that we are engaging with the Indigenous communities as knowledge holders. How are we doing it? Are we asking the right questions? Are we creating the right places? How are we re-establishing colonial patterns? How can this be decolonial? How can it not be extractive and exploitative? And there were lots of questions because especially in India, these kinds of programs are quite new. And so we are setting a precedent as well about, inviting Indigenous elders, but really not wanting it to repeat some of the extractive, exploitative patterns that has been around for a very long time. So these questions led us to collaborate with Kalpavriksha and the Galp Sangam process to co-organize the Indigenous Worldviews with Galp Sangam towards the end of last year, where we had around 12 to 14 different Adivasi groups that came together to talk about worldviews. And part of the process, I mean, I think here I really have to say that it took us like 8 months to organize this process, because really the first group that came together were asking all these questions. You know, we were individuals who had all these questions. So ICA had all these questions around knowledge sharing and what is reciprocity when you're sharing knowledge, and asking Indigenous elders to share their knowledge of the, ecocentrism and Indigenous worldviews. And Kalpavriksha had come from a slightly different perspective, and there were many different sort of questions that we were holding. And then the first group that met, we had a whole process of really looking at what is it that we're trying to do here. And then we wrote a concept note explaining what is it that we want to do. Then we took it to several Indigenous groups and people working with Indigenous communities and invited them into the process. Then it went into a process of several meetings where we were trying to get feedback from Indigenous groups and communities into how would this look like? How would this dialogue look like? And trust me, it was great that we had all that feedback, because it was a great dialogue. Which was, most of the sessions were led by different Indigenous groups themselves, and there was a lot of sharing, and a lot of subgroups have come out of it. One of the subgroups that ICA has taken on is to look at protocols of collaboration. What protocols can guide Indigenous and non-Indigenous groups to collaborate and to start working on it and to get communities to approve it. So it's a long process, and we're just starting the first steps of that now. And then after the Emerging Leaders Forum, we partnered with an organization called Dhatri that works with Indigenous women and girls in 5 different states of India, who are at the forefront of resistance movements, resistance against mining, against eviction from forests. And we went to Jharkhand in Chhatra in Jharkhand, central India, to document the stories of people in Chhatra district. And Nirmala ji, who you see here in the second photo with us, she's a leader from Chhatra, a women's leader, and she took us around. And so this was our initiative to amplify voices of Indigenous communities who were part of our programs. And this is a documentary that Raji was talking about. So we have a lot of footage that we are editing at the moment, and it will soon come out. And towards the end of last year, we had a program which we called Requiem. And Requiem as in really remembering the death of species that's happening all around us at the moment. It seemed to me that, extinction is happening and it's just passing us by. And we are not even stopping to think of what is actually going on. So Requiem is just that. It's a moment to remember and to create spaces where we can share. So we had this program, which was, I think, 5 weeks long. And it was called Anthropocene, From Despair to Active Hope. And we had invited several artists, writers, poets, singers, shamans, cartoonists, ecologists, to talk about how is it that they're dealing with their despair with the work that they're putting out into the world. And it was a rich series of conversations where they shared several strategies and also their feelings around how it feels at times, when you're dealing with this material. Even if the artwork that comes out is beautiful, there's a process that they go through in terms of really engaging with that. And so this is on our YouTube channel. I'll put out the links just after, so you can have access to this. And so this is our new program, which is the Community Climate Resilience Program. And last year, we were engaged in some theoretical research around what is resilience, what is community resilience and well-being, and how does it apply to local place-based community adaptation. And we've come across several frameworks, and we've been developing a framework that might work in rural India. And now we're ready to go into sort of an action research mode where we want to try out some of that with community, get feedback, and co-design with community. So now we are preparing for a climate adaptation and resilience survey in this bioregion, which is the Kaluveli watershed bioregion, which is both Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry. So we are in the border of Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry states, and it includes both the states. And then developing culturally sensitive, context-specific, place-based climate awareness resource materials and workshops in Tamil. So the trouble that a lot of climate awareness programs are running into now is because a lot of it is translated and is very abstract. Climate is an abstract concept. So how do you bring that down to lived experience? Because it's also a lived experience. Communities are dealing with change on a daily basis. And so the idea is to develop that material with communities, co-designing and co-developing it with communities, with focus group discussions. And that will be a 6-month-long process here. We're just starting that right now. We're also working on a fellowship on water, because in this region, water is a main issue. We go through floods and droughts, depending, we had drought for 3 years, and then we had a heavy rain season. Cyclones are predicted in this region. So, water is an issue that is ongoing here. And for this program, we have several collaborations. We have Initiatives for Climate Action in Bangalore that has been collaborating with us since the beginning with the research, and they're hoping to do similar things in Bangalore with us, and the ICCA Consortium. The ICCA Consortium is the International Community Conserved Areas Consortium, and we are collaborating with the South Asia wing of that. And these are some of the activities that we were involved in last year. We went to several interfaith harmony and climate justice dialogues at the Fireflies Cultural Center last year, where we had several faith-based leaders and also interfaith organizations who had come. We also had climate activists and climate justice activists come together. And these are groups that probably have never met before. And so these are the first steps of looking at what are the intersections and how can we, create that interfaith dialogue around climate in India. As some of you might know, the faith-based communal issues in India have been really exasperated with the current government, and which is worrying for spaces that are dealing with climate adaptation. We were also part of a well-being and climate justice dialogue and online conferences, we ran several workshops also in Oroville with visiting university students. We had a guest lecture in Asim Premji University, and also a workshop at the Center for Spiritual Ecology in Bangalore. Now going into that, several workshops and talks. So I'm going to end my talk with the fact that right now we are also with this talk launching our fundraising campaign. We need 3 lakhs, which is around $3,700 to continue our work this year, especially for the new avenue of climate adaptation in this bioregion that we are hoping to start with the climate survey. And any donations that you can make would make a big difference to us. As a small project in Oroville, we work with half maintenances to be exact, and which for an outsider is a small stipend. So all of this work is done as service to the world. It's not done for salary. It's not done to make any money. We are completely dependent on donations. And so this is also a call for support. We have an online workshop on emotional resilience coming up. And we're hoping that people can donate some amount of money and attend the workshop, so that it's also something that's useful for you. I'll stop here